Up next, Transportation Secretary Samuel Skinner is the guest at the National Press Club here in Washington earlier today. The Secretary unveiled his proposal for a national transportation strategy last week. After a statement to the group today, he takes questions on a variety of issues.
Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Greg Spears and I'm a reporter for Knight Ridder Newspapers and a member of the National Press Club Board of Governors. I'd like now to introduce our head table guests and ask them to please stand briefly when their names are called. I also would like to ask the audience to withhold applause until all the names are read. Starting at my left, your right, Mitchell Lowson of the Chicago Tribune. Bob Hillman, Dallas Morning News. David Field, Washington Times. James Gannon, Detroit News. Seth Payne, McGraw-Hill. The Honorable Elaine Chao, Deputy Secretary of the Department of Transportation. Skipping over our speaker, Vera Glasser, Washington Magazine, and the Chairwoman of the National Press Club Speakers Committee. John Cushman of the New York Times. Cheryl Arvidsson of the Dallas Times-Herald. John Gaughan, Secretary Skinner's Chief of Staff. Jim Carroll, Knight Ridder Newspapers. And Mike Briggs of the Chicago Sun-Times. During the first year as his Secretary of Transportation, Samuel K. Skinner has become known as the Master of Disaster. When the Exxon Valdez ran aground in Alaska's Prince William Sound, Skinner was quickly on the scene. When Hurricane Hugo blew ashore in South Carolina, Skinner got there fast. When an earthquake shook San Francisco, Skinner was dispatched to the scene by the President. Last week, Skinner issued his much-awaited National Transportation Plan, a comprehensive look at the nation's transportation network and the major issues facing aviation, mass transit, railroads, trucking, the maritime industry, and the Coast Guard. To many state and local officials, as well as congressional Democrats, the Skinner Plan seemed one more disaster. They said the administration piled too much of the cost of maintaining the existing transportation system on state and local governments and upon the transportation users. New Jersey Democrat Senator Frank Lautenberg, for example, said the federal government was turning its back on the national transportation system. Skinner's plan will take some selling, it appears. But Skinner, as he recently told an interviewer not long ago, got his first job at age 11 selling programs at a horse show at the Springfield, Illinois Fairgrounds. I made $6, and I've been selling ever since, he said. He's a good salesman, too. In 1967, he was named IBM's Outstanding Salesman of the Year in the firm's 17-state Midwest region. Born in Chicago 51 years ago, Skinner received an undergraduate degree in accounting from the University of Chicago in 1960 and a law degree from DePaul University in 1966. He served as an assistant in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois from 1968 to 75, when he was named U.S. Attorney there. He earned the nickname of Sam the Hammer for his relentless pursuit of criminal prosecutions. Before his selection by President Bush, Skinner was a senior partner in a Chicago law firm and the chairman of the Regional Transportation Authority of Northeastern Illinois. Skinner served as Bush's Illinois campaign chairman in 1988.
I think it's been almost a year since I've been before the press club to discuss issues that are very, very important. The last time I was here, I spoke to you about my paramount concern as Secretary of Transportation, and that is, of course, my concern and our dedication towards safety. My second priority, right behind safety, has been to develop, as I discussed with you a year ago, a comprehensive, integrated strategy by which this country can establish and begin to put into action a complete range of transportation objectives. I am proud to say, as I reported to the President last week, we have accomplished that objective, and our national transportation policy will play an essential role in America's ability to remain productive and competitive in a growing international market. When the President released the policy last week, I told him I thought that the team at the Department of Transportation had put in a good first quarter, but that we had 3 quarters to go. Our policy will guide us as we move on with the upcoming transportation reauthorization bills, but let me just step back for a minute and explain our reasons for developing this strategic approach in the first place. It begins almost with the fact that the world has entered a period of profound change. A year ago, or 10 months ago, when I began this process, I had no idea just how profound the change was going to be. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to attend the joint session of Congress, which was addressed by the new president of Czechoslovakia. President Havel said at that time, "The human face of the world is changing so rapidly that none of the familiar political speedometers are adequate." Who could have ever imagined a year ago the kinds of change we have experienced today? Changes that cut across all sectors of human activity. In international politics, we're seeing the emergence of allies and alliances and realignments that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. In science, basic research, and technological development, we are expanding at a remarkable rate. And today's global trade and competitiveness far outmatch in intensity and scale that of any period in the history of commerce. All this means, as we sit here today in Washington and in this country, that we very well may be embarking on an era of unprecedented global economic expansion, and with it, unprecedented challenges. In transportation, we must be prepared to meet those challenges. The President said it best, as he usually does, when he said last week, "No sector is more important to the American economy than transportation." As world trade grows even larger, as we continue our leadership in an increasingly global society, we will become even more dependent upon our transportation system than we are today. The nations that lead in the 21st century will be the nations with the safest and most efficient transportation systems. They will be the ones that are the most innovative and the most creative. They will be the countries that capture the future because they plan for the future. And that's what the National Transportation Policy is all about. It is based on the fundamental assumption that America's success in the world requires long-term strategic approach. Let me give you just one example of what happens when our nation, doesn't plan ahead. Almost 40 years ago, America gave birth to an exciting new technology that offered great promise for the future. It was the nuclear power industry that today supplies this nation with about 20% of our electricity. When the industry was conceived, everyone believed that the federal government would have a way to find a way to dispose of large quantities of nuclear waste, and it must be disposed of safely and permanently. But the government didn't get serious about this need until the 1980s, 30 years too late. As a result, an entire industry is now left hanging in the balance as we move forward to solve this problem. Fortunately, we have the talents of Admiral Watkins at the Department of Energy to help us find a solution to this problem. But he has inherited a problem which has been estimated by some to be of the magnitude of $250 billion or more, because our government never had a strategic plan to deal with this problem in the beginning. If the Department of Transportation, we are doing everything we can that the government, this administration, doesn't leave a similar legacy in transportation. It really comes down to a very basic principle, one that's as simple as the Scout oath I learned early in my life: be prepared. The fact is that nations, just like individuals, must be prepared if we're going to succeed. No successful corporation in this country or in the world would ever think of facing the future without being prepared with a comprehensive strategy, a strategic plan. And I suggest the federal government shouldn't either. When we began thinking about the national transportation policy early last year, we started with the premise that it couldn't be imposed from the top down. We knew it was something that could not be dreamed up in Washington for the benefit of the rest of the country. That's why we went out to the people and conducted one of the most extensive outreach programs ever conducted by our government. We held 117 public events in 43 towns and cities all over this country. We listened to the American people from every sector and from all walks of life. What we have produced is not a centralized plan. It is not an industrial policy, and it was never intended to be. It is a set of guidelines, not a set of specifics. It is not a budget document, although it was prepared in tandem with the department's budget. Our strategy provides a decision-making framework to help federal, state, and local officials and the private sector make long-range plans for America's transportation needs. The National Transportation Policy, in short, is a charter for the new era. The transportation system in this country is now essentially in place. Our interstate highway system is almost complete. Our aerospace industry and vast aviation complex is the best in the world. Railroads span our continent like an intricate web. Modern seaports dot our endless shorelines. The great age of laying the foundation of America's transportation system is basically over. Now we must get on with the business in a new era of maintaining and modernizing and expanding what we have. We must find new ways to use existing systems. We must develop new technologies and more innovative approaches to financing. The foundation era of transportation must now give rise to the innovation era. Surface transportation can be made more safer and more efficient through such things as intelligent vehicles and intelligent highways. This evolving array of advanced communications technology could someday give drivers immediate traffic information over special units in their cars. It could warn of an accident on the road ahead and provide drivers with quick, safe alternative routes, displaying on a computer screen in their automobile or even a verbal command indicating conditions ahead and on competing highways. Traffic systems and signals would adjust to traffic conditions, regulating and redirecting drivers in the most efficient manner possible. The new transportation era calls for a new approach. In the past, the federal government took the lead in developing the nation's transportation system. The time has come for the federal government to share its leadership role. Not transfer, but share its leadership role. to create new partnerships with state and local governments and with the private sector. The National Conference of State Legislatures said, in replying and commenting on the National Transportation Policy, the National Conference said, it applauds our effort to realign roles and responsibilities. The proposed move away from the inflexible categorical funding and onerous federal requirements has long been sought by the states. The conference said state officials are best able to determine their needs in their individual states. A partnership effort will spur innovation. And all innovation, whether it be in financing or in technology, is best fostered by a decentralized environment. And that's why our strategy calls for greater flexibility for state and local governments and for the private sector. They've asked for it, they want it, and we will give that to them. Flexibility, however, is only one side of the coin. The other side is responsibility. Responsibility to operate and maintain and expand upon what we have in place. That means, in many cases, raising revenue in the form of user fees. All levels of government should play a role in this endeavor. Contrary to some press reports, the department is willing, and the government is willing, and the president is willing to take the heat by proposing increased user fees where appropriate to meet infrastructure and operating needs.